In 1944, a fighter tank commander suddenly vanished without a trace. He and his entire crew seemed to have disappeared overnight. But 40 years later, searchers finally discovered what really happened, and they were completely speechless after finding the truth. It was the height of World War II. German tanks, under the command of Field Marshal Paul Hauser, were pushing deep into Eastern Europe. With them were Soviet forces led by General Vasily Chukov. It was a bitter winter, and the battle raged. On January, Hauser's troops pushed forward. A fierce battle took place near the village of Razania, and then suddenly, a company of Soviet T-70 tanks disappeared without a trace. The enemy did not capture them, and there was no wreckage anywhere to be seen. It was almost as if they had melted into thin air. There were 6 vehicles with some 60 soldiers. They included 3 T-70 light tanks and 3 T-37A armored vehicles. They simply vanished. There were no signs of a crash, no dead bodies, and no fuel leaks. In the following days, desperate searches were carried out. But aside from some bullet casings, nothing was found. That is why the residents of the region began to tell stories about this cursed location. According to legend, everything that entered this place would be destroyed. Later, a version appeared that all of the vehicles had fallen victim to partisans. This was even suggested by General Chukov himself. However, he admitted that he had no evidence for this. Instead, it's believed that due to the poor quality of the roads, the tanks fell into the marsh and became stuck in the thick mud. But since the tanks were considered lost, they were no longer searched for. For over 4 decades, this case remained unsolved. Families of the missing men had to come to terms with the fact that they would never see their loved ones again. But then in the 1980s, a group of historians and military divers decided to take another look at the events of that day. They returned to the sites where the units had last been seen. For more than 1 year, they questioned locals who had witnessed the battle. One story kept coming back. Many told the researchers that deep in the woods, several kilometers away from the actual battlefield, an 80-ton tank was buried. Others said it was lying at the bottom of a swamp. This strange story prompted the divers to return to the site. There they began searching for the lost vehicle with the help of a sonar. But the water was so murky that they could barely see anything. After hours of searching, they finally managed to pick up something large on the radar. It was probably a tree, they thought, and tried to move on. But this object didn't seem to match the contours of a tree. Intrigued, the divers decided to investigate further. They dropped an anchor and prepared to dive since no one knew exactly what they were dealing with. They had brought along special equipment. When they finally got to the bottom of the lake, they saw that they had stumbled upon something extraordinary. With a bit of luck, they had discovered the missing tank. Sonar scans had shown that it was about 80 feet long, which matched the dimensions of a T-70 tank. But how could it be that after all this time, the tank was still in such good condition? The researchers spent weeks carefully excavating the area around the vehicle. When they finally succeeded in uncovering it, no one could believe their eyes. In front of them lay a Soviet T-70 tank from World War II, completely covered in mud. It looked like it had just been driven into the lake and parked there. But that wasn't the only thing that amazed the divers. As they approached the tank, they noticed that the hatches on top of the vehicle were open, and when they peered inside, they saw that the crew was still sitting at their stations. At first glance, it looked like they had just stepped out of their vehicles for a quick swim, but a closer look revealed that the crew had been stuck inside the tank for more than 40 years. Even more amazing, none of the bodies showed any signs of decomposition. The divers continued to explore the tank. They found personal belongings of the crew members, including letters, photographs, and the commander's watch. And what was most incredible, the watch was still running. As soon as the researchers opened the hatch, they realized why. The interior of the tank was filled with gas, and this had the effect of keeping the bodies well preserved. To their great surprise, the men's uniforms were still intact. Even documents and equipment were still present. To date, it's unknown why these men were inside the tank when it fell. Perhaps they were taking cover, or maybe they wanted to escape the cold. But the most pressing question of all was how the tank managed to remain hidden for all this time. The only plausible explanation seems to be that the ground gave way unexpectedly, swallowing the tanks and crew in a flash. Perhaps the icy mud provided enough buoyancy so that the vehicles did not sink immediately. Instead, they could have floated for a few minutes before eventually succumbing to the weight of the mud and water and sinking to the bottom of the lake. But there are other theories. Some believe that the area was cursed and that's why everything that entered it disappeared. Others believe that it was actually a portal that opened up here during the battle. In fact, according to some reports, the portal swallowed up 2 companies of German tanks in 1943, but this story has never been confirmed. What do you think? Do you know of similar mysterious events from the war? We'd love to hear your stories in the comments. After the announcement of the discovery, the families of the missing persons were informed and some relatives came to the site. For them, it was a long-awaited answer. After all those years, they now knew what had happened to their loved ones. But despite the happy ending, This event is still considered one of the strangest mysteries of World War II. The tank has since been lifted from the bottom of the lake and is on display in a museum. Some visitors report feeling uneasy after seeing it. Could it be that the souls of the dead crew members are still lingering here? We don't know, but one detail makes us shudder. When the researchers first powered on the radio inside the tank, they heard a faint transmission. It was a distress call from a Soviet T-70 tank. It was the same type of tank that was lost. The transmission said, "Our crew is pinned down. We need support. Repeat, we are pinned down and need support." Then the transmission abruptly ended. At first, the researchers assumed that it was interference, but this didn't seem likely since the radio had been off for over 40 years. And it's unlikely that such transmissions can be picked up after such a long time. Could it be that the brave soldiers were trying to contact the outside world even after all these years? We don't know. But one thing is certain. Sometimes history has a way of repeating itself. In 2014, a farmer was plowing his field when suddenly his tractor sank. Miraculously, he managed to free the vehicle from the mud, but the story could have ended much more tragically. It seems that even today, the soil in this region is unstable and dangerous. Now it's your turn. What do you think? Can you imagine how frightening this must have been for the people back then? Let us know your thoughts, suggestions, and feedback in the comments below. Also, while you're at it, remember to subscribe for more exciting content. Thanks for watching. Have a good one, and see you next time.